Rituals of repossession. That one of the things that was common to Africans under enslavement. They created rituals to repossess themselves. And these rituals were done in the night, in sacred spaces that they framed. Repossession is used because Africans were possessed, owned by the enslavers. And repossession rituals, and these were described in various literatures and handed down, and they still continue to this day in Voodoo, in Mayal revival in Jamaica, in what was called Shango, now Orisha, in Trinidad. In Cuba, we have Santeria, or what the Cubans call Lucame, which is a tradition out of Nigeria. And there is also a tradition out of the Congo that they call Palo. And Palo in Cuba is called Mayombe. You have Comfort in Guyana. You have Candomblé and other such practices in Brazil. And of course, you have in the Eastern Caribbean, including Trinidad, you have what is called spiritual Baptists. These are institutions founded by enslaved Africans, and they were created out of their African experiences on the continent. And they did that within the Caribbean under different contexts. Repossession rituals were forms of therapy. Having been treated with such unspeakable brutality, like being forced to consume human excrement by various types of amputations, arms, legs, genital amputations, being forced to eat food that was really not good. Sick animals that died on the estates were not thrown away. They were converted as food for the enslaved population. And so, in order to live within that context, in order to survive, in order to resist, they performed these rituals of repossession. These rituals took various forms, but they were quite similar. It's a use of artistic expressions for invocations, music, dance, various forms of scatting, groaning, various forms of ritual writing. One name for such is Veve. But these were all common to all of these practices across the Caribbean, which also used alcoholic beverages, different forms of food, and the combination of all of these was to induce possession. The idea is being possessed by African gods and African ancestors. The sum total of these endeavors was to reach the point of being possessed by African spirits. That possession is a form of therapy because the possession means that the person who is possessed became the spirit that possessed that person. So a man like the case in Westmoreland who was forced to eat human excrement. At the point of doing that, it's a form of real desecration of the black body, spirit and soul. But the possession ritual enabled him to be possessed by an ancestor God, and therefore, in that period of possession, that person cleansed himself by becoming an African god, could be Legba or Oshun, any other form, or by African ancestral spirits. So possession ritual across the Caribbean was extremely important in their resistance culture. I have done studies of African insurrections against slavery throughout the Caribbean. And like the Asian Revolution, which began with 2 ritual feasts, it is really linking, converting with, communion with the ancestors to go into war with them. So the Asian Revolution began with 2 such rituals. And even after slavery, in Jamaica, the Morant Bay Uprising, led by Paul Bogle, began the day before, the night before, with a tea meeting in Stony Gut. So these rituals are extremely important, and it's a result of that we can speak to the issue of repatriation. Because the cosmological roots of repatriation began in those rituals. When somebody dies and his spirit person was freed from the dead body, that spirit with the right kind of funeral and wake arrangements was able to repatriate to the ancestral homeland. And then is able to be summoned by the enslaved, by the living, through various forms of feeding ritual, feasting ritual, and libation, to come back and fight with them in their struggles. And so death, which releases the person's spirit, is seen as the beginning, the cosmological roots of African diasporic freedom. So it is very important in our studies with our students, with the population of the Caribbean and further afield, to develop this type of scholarship and to engage in these rituals of ancestry that will help us to understand where we are coming from. Because at the heart of Caribbean culture is Caribbean spirituality. Mambo music, which Cuba gave to the world, emerged out of Santeria and Mayombe, including the immediate agency of that music. So it is with ska, rocksteady, reggae. Pan music was created out of Orisha Palais of Trinidad and given to the world. Pan as an instrument and pan as an artistic and aesthetic expression came out of that. to teach about Caribbean spirituality and about Caribbean religion and to favor one over the other is totally wrong. Just ask ourselves, what does Bob Marley mean? What does Marley mean to Jamaican culture, to the Jamaican economy? we can ask the same thing about Lee Scratch Perry. We can ask the same thing about a whole pantheon of these people in the different forms of our musical expression. We're talking about making money. Why do tourists come to Jamaica? The Jamaican cultural expression is subsidizing the tourist industry in Jamaica. Even though we have people who now hold their noses and say, no, we mustn't teach these things. Right? So the same thing with Caribbean art. Our leading painters like Leroy Clark from Trinidad, Manuel Mendive from Cuba, Philip Moore from Guyana, is rooted in this culture. So if we want to study aesthetics in Caribbean creativity, we have to go by that route. We can't look for something from Europe. And it is there and done already. We have influenced the globe culturally and in specific forms. Ask ourselves, what are the sources of these forms of creativity? What are the sources of Jamaican and Caribbean visual artistic expression, of Jamaican dramatic traditions and Caribbean dramatic tradition? Luckily, many of our novelists have linked into that tradition to write some of the most beautiful novels we have in the world, which include in their writings the novel as a source of Caribbean philosophy. The Caribbean is nothing internationally without its culture. Some of our best researchers in medical science became the best because they linked to folk medicine. They were able to research the plants, the pharmaceutical industry. So we are really still stifled by the Eurocentric episteme, which tell us ontologically we are nothing. And we are only something or somebody if we are able to ape the European ways of existence. We must resolutely fight this thing. We are 62 years of independence. We have had 468 years of colonial subjection, in which 330 of those years were years of enslavement. So what I'm saying is not easy. I understand the basis of this type of deformation. I understand it. But we have to fight it because we have had a history of anti-colonial resistance, and we are actually subverting the expression of these in our scholarship, in certain institutions that should know better. Because you know what? Some people in their narrowness benefit from these things, and therefore they want to continue to suppress it. We must not give a quarter